All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to completely decode the existential roots of why trying to force a perfect relationship usually ends up completely destroying it. You know, we all realize relationships are incredibly important. Actually, a massive Harvard study literally found that close relationships are a way bigger predictor of happiness than money or fame. But despite knowing that, we still have this wild tendency to sabotage love.
So it brings up a question that plagues pretty much all of modern romance. Why does holding on too tight usually push love away? To find the real answer, we've got to start with psychology. Think about learning to drive for the very first time. You were probably an absolute nervous wreck, right? White-knuckling the steering wheel, darting your eyes nervously right in front of the bumper. But your instructor probably told you to loosen your grip, relax, and lift your gaze. Interestingly enough, that exact same principle applies to romance. White-knuckling a relationship? Yeah, that pretty much guarantees a crash.
The crucial point here is that folks with an anxious attachment style often experience this really intense fear of abandonment, usually stemming from inconsistent caregiving when they were young. Basically, when a child's needs are repeatedly ignored, they grow up constantly terrified that their loved ones will just turn away. In adulthood, the screams clinginess. It's the person who's endlessly texting their partner, reading into every single tiny comment, or absolutely panicking when their significant other just asks for a little space. But to truly cure this, well, we have to look way beyond just psychology. Today, we're going to diagnose this modern dilemma by turning to the mid-century existential philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. Here's our agenda. We'll start with the clingy relationship dilemma, unpack bad faith and the God project, explore the paradox of possession, introduce the liberating project of disclosure, examine Beauvoir's ideas on authentic equality, and finally, learn exactly how to choose mutual freedom. Moving on to Section 1. The clingy relationship dilemma. Let's see how relationship anxiety actually manifests in our everyday lives. We all know someone who turns a tiny bit of relationship friction into a full-blown wildfire, right? Well, this brilliantly illustrates what we call the pursuer-distancer dynamic. It's a vicious cycle where pushing for connection only forces your partner to withdraw even further. The anxious partner, absolutely terrified of losing the relationship, becomes incredibly needy. They pursue. The other partner, feeling totally suffocated by that desperation, withdraws to get some emotional and physical breathing room. They distance. And then, of course, seeing their partner pull away, the pursuer panics and pushes even harder. It is a perfectly self-destructive loop. Let's look at Section 2, Bad Faith and the God Project. To understand the hidden root cause of this clinging, Sartre actually elevates this psychological problem into a massive existential one. In dense philosophical works like Being and Nothingness, Sartre explains something fascinating. He says that humans are fundamentally terrified of our own radical, unpredictable freedom. You see, existentialism teaches that existence precedes essence. That means we don't just have some fixed, prepackaged nature. We have to constantly make choices and basically invent who we are. And honestly, that massive responsibility causes us deep existential anguish. It is absolutely exhausting to be constantly responsible for your own identity. To cope with this sheer terror, we adopt what Sartre calls bad faith. We essentially try to convince ourselves that we don't have choices, that we're just objects reacting to the world. We pretend our actions are inevitable. We play these rigid roles, like the flawless employee or the perfectly devoted lover, and act as if we are entirely defined by those labels. Why? Just to escape the crushing anxiety of our own free will. And that leads directly to the God project. This is our impossible urge to achieve the permanent justified existence of a simple object, like a stone, while somehow simultaneously remaining a fully conscious subject. Think about a rock. It just is. It doesn't stress out about what career to pick or who to date. Sartre argues we secretly want to be exactly like that rock, necessary, permanent, and justified. But we also want to stay conscious enough to actually enjoy it. We basically want to be our own ultimate cause. We literally want to be God. All right, Section 3, the paradox of possession. Because when we apply this impossible God project to our romantic lives, it creates an absolute disaster. Think about it. How do we try to achieve this fixed, rock-like nature? We try to get it through the eyes of our partner. Bad faith love operates as this trap of infinite referral. Both partners try to appropriate the other person's freedom just to feel secure, which obviously leads to constant dissatisfaction. The lover wants their partner to look at them and say, "You are my absolute world. You are my perfect destiny." They want to be turned into a magnificent, totally secure object. But the crazy part? the partner wants the exact same thing right back. They both want to be worshipped by a completely free subject, but they want that subject to be so devoted that they give up their own freedom. It's an impossible math equation. The hard truth is, you just cannot possess a free subject without completely destroying the very freedom you fell in love with in the first place. That leaves the lover forever paranoid and deeply insecure. Bad faith love is just incredibly destructive. You demand a sworn oath that they will never, ever leave. But a sworn oath is an obligation, not free love. So you end up living in absolute terror that their radical freedom might lead them away. And then there's the shame. That awful shame when you realize you were actually just one choice among many potential partners. You weren't some magical destiny at all. That is exactly why the anxious partner clings so hard. They are desperately trying to suppress the terrifying freedom of the person they love. But there is hope. Let's get into Section 4, the Project of Disclosure. Sartre and Beauvoir offer a powerful, genuinely liberating antidote to this awful paradox. They contrast bad faith with what they call authentic love, which is entirely centered on the project of disclosure. Here, the goal is to generously unveil the other person rather than trying to own them. Instead of the God project, where we try to swallow up the other person to fix our own messy identity, we actively choose generosity. Beauvoir uses this brilliant metaphor for it. Imagine gliding over a vast, gorgeous snowfield on skis. You absolutely delight in the snow, you appreciate its beauty, but you don't try to shove the entire snowfield into your pocket, right? You don't try to possess it, you simply disclose it and appreciate that it exists. She writes, love is renunciation of all possession, of all confusion. One renounces being in order that there may be that being which one is not. That so beautifully captures Beauvoir's point. Authentic love requires us to deeply value our partner's vulnerability and just accept their fundamental independence. You literally have to love them in their otherness. An authentic lover rejoices in the fact that their partner has totally separate projects, different friends, and their own wildly unpredictable future. You give their freedom a safe space to breathe instead of trying to trap it in a cage built out of your own insecurities. Which brings us to Section 5, Beauvoir and Authentic Equality. Now, actually moving from bad faith to authentic love requires a massive societal shift. It isn't just a neat little psychological trick you can play in your head. It demands real structural change. Beauvoir argued that because authentic love absolutely requires two equals, patriarchal structures that demand female submission make true authenticity incredibly difficult to achieve. In her groundbreaking book, The Second Sex, she explains that patriarchy conditions women to be the woman in love, someone who totally sacrifices her own identity for a male master. Well, if society tells women their only value comes from submerging themselves into a man's life and tells men to be the ultimate sovereign subject, love is completely deformed right from the start. True, authentic love has to be a democracy of two genuinely free individuals founded on mutual recognition. Finally, Section 6, Choosing Mutual Freedom. We really do have to acknowledge that even for brilliant minds like Sartre and Beauvoir, achieving this philosophical ideal was a tremendously messy reality. Though they shared a famous open morganic marriage for 51 years, their lived experience was actually full of hypocrisy, jealousy, and inequality. They famously rejected traditional bourgeois marriage and promised each other essential freedom, while allowing for side affairs that they called contingent. But in practice, well, Sartre was a notorious womanizer, and Beauvoir's own letters reveal absolutely crippling bouts of jealousy. Their union was often very unbalanced. It goes to show that simply slapping the label open or authentic on a relationship doesn't just magically erase basic human insecurity. In fact, as their former student Bianca Bienenfeld noted, their often highly exploitative affairs prove that authenticity is an ongoing, difficult joint project. It's definitely not a magical finish line. Beauvoir herself had exploitative relationships with young female students, including Bienenfeld, who was ultimately discarded by both Beauvoir and Sartre. The big takeaway here isn't to idolize their messy personal lives. It's to realize that authentic love is a constant, deliberate practice. It's a daily choice to fight against our deeply ingrained bad faith and the societal conditioning that constantly pushes us toward wanting to possess people. So, what does this all mean for us? The next time you feel that relationship panic setting in, just leave the God project behind and ask yourself this absolutely crucial question. Are you holding on so incredibly tight because you genuinely want to support them? Or is it because you are just terrified of your own lack of control? Seriously, loosen your grip on the steering wheel. Embrace the project of disclosure. True love isn't about finding a heavy stone to anchor your existence, it's about making the choice to ski alongside another beautifully unpredictable human being. Think about that the next time you look at your own relationships.